Leafs have a goaltending prospect named Ian Scott. Just go Google his name and you'll love the Wikipedia page that first shows up.
That's funny.
That's all I can say. And parlez-vous français to you too. Today's show is going to be the closeout, sort of the closeout of our depth in the NHL, or the lack thereof. And we've done the centers, defense, both sides of the wing, and now we come to Justin's favorite spot, the goaltending. I actually think this is the most interesting one that we've done so far, because it's maybe the largest collection of teams that you really could throw in a bunch of them. Like, yeah, there are some teams where it's obvious that they struggle at the goaltending position. We'll just, I don't know, throw out a name like Philadelphia. Everyone knows that they're having troubles with their goaltending, but they've got Carter Hart in the weeds. So we know, their depth is is interesting because, yeah, their starting goalie sucks, but there's a guy coming. And so this is where it's so difficult, because a lot of these teams with bad goaltending now actually have somebody who looks like they might be able to come in eventually and play well. But there's only really two guys, maybe three guys in an organization that ever get a shot at one time. So how did you go about doing this maybe a little bit differently than the rest of the positions that we've covered?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on what you said, there aren't a ton of guys to, like, for instance, when we did defense, right? You have 6, 7, 8 guys on each team that you can base your bias around, on your opinion of, oh, this team sucks at defense, right?
Right.
And
right.
on goaltending, it's like, okay, there's really 2 guys, maybe 3 on each team that you can look at and be like, all right, this really makes up the core of their goaltending. And then maybe there's one decent, one, mediocre prospect they might have. Sure. And so you kind of have to go off that. So for me, I kind of pulled together a bunch of teams that just, when you look at their starting 2 guys, right? Like, you just say, okay, well, they're not good. They're not good. They're not good. This team, nope, not good, not good. And then once I gather all those teams, I started to look at maybe what they had in the prospect pool and say, okay, well, this guy could be good. This guy's projected to be a superstar. This guy's projected to be a starter at some point. So kind of base it on that, I guess, is that weight a little bit more, and then at the tail end of everything else.
Sure. And it's probably the most difficult position to evaluate on an individual basis, because the team plays such a big role into how good that goaltender is. Although, you look at a team like Detroit and the way that Jimmy Howard is just carrying them right now, you also have to factor in the fact that sometimes and some particular goalies can just put a team on their back and carry them for a long time. And they're almost unexplainable stretches of greatness for certain goaltenders. I'd say Jimmy Howard's one, and actually his counterpart, Peter Mrazek, he had a pretty fantastic 4 or 5 month stretch, probably 4 years ago now, when he was just lights out over the winter. And all that to be said, welcome to the show, Overtime Hockey Talk. I'm Mark, this is Justin, and let's get into our lack of goaltending, good depth. Yes. So the Florida Panthers narrowly missed my list. I'm just going to start throwing out some teams that narrowly missed, because I have 4 of them that narrowly missed. So the Florida Panthers are my narrowly missed. I almost put them in here. Luongo, I know you're like, how could you put a team with Luongo, who when healthy is a top 10 goaltender in the league, tends to be, statistically speaking.
His Twitter account alone, you can throw him out of this conversation.
That's fair. Yes. And then you go, well, they have James Reimer too, with a solid backup who has shown that he can take 30 games, 40 games in a season and do fine. Yeah, fine is really as top of my adjectives for the way that he plays. He's just fine. He's not necessarily going to lose you that many games. But he's also not going to win you many games either. And I almost put them in here because Luongo seems like he's never healthy. And my God, what are they going to do if it's Reimer and Hutchinson next year? Because Reimer's still under contract for next year.
Yes, he is.
So so's
Luongo.
Yes. And we'll see. because Luongo was considering retirement last year. Remember, he got hurt, and he's just saying that he wasn't having any fun, and then he came back, and then he was like, oh, I've been reinvigorated. Then he goes and he gets hurt again twice already. Right, I think it's twice.
Yeah,
he's gotten hurt. So
he's going to be like a Henrik Zetterberg when he retires. Not officially, because of the whole cap recapture penalty thing that Vancouver and Florida would end up, occurring.
Right, you just go jog on the LTIR.
Exactly.
For a while. Yeah, sure. Join Joffrey Lupul and Chris Pronger,
Nathan Horton.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Who else missed? Who missed your list?
A couple teams. I didn't put 4. I actually put 3. So Vancouver Canucks. I know they're starting tandem right now with Markstrom and Nielsen. You look at those guys and you're like, not so good. But when you get into their prospect pool, to me, it's pretty strong. DiPietro and Demko, 2 guys that should be starters in this league at some point, we would assume.
Yeah, 2 guys on like the top 15-ish goaltending prospects already drafted right now. So that, I mean, if you've got 2 out of the 15, you're doing better than at least 14 teams in the league. So, there's, at least in terms of their depth at that position in their prospect pool, they have some.
Yep. 2 other teams, the New York Islanders, I think, last year I would have definitely put them in here, but I think Barry Trotz has sort of molded Leonard and Greiss. They've regained their form a little bit. So,
and I think that we've seen that Thomas Greiss actually not that bad. Robin Leonard not that bad. Just playing for terrible teams. Well, I won't say the Islanders were terrible last year, but I would say that the Islanders gave up a lot of opportunities. A lot like maybe a Craig Anderson. He's not terrible, but boy, are the Senators making him look bad.
For sure. And last team down I just missed was the Blackhawks. I love...
Have them on there too.
Yeah, I love Corey Crawford. You and I talk, sing his praises all the time, but once you get past him, it's bare.
He is why I kept them off this list. I almost had them on here because of his health, but I'm willing to leave them off this list for now because, hey, Corey Crawford, there's a chance he plays for another 5 years.
Absolutely is.
He really regains his form and gets going, and overall, Chicago is a pretty bad team too, so it's really hard to tell why they're bad. So also New Jersey, Arizona, they just missed my list as well.
Okay.
Arizona now with what sounds like Antti Niemi going to be out for the year.
Antti Ranta.
Ranta,
yeah.
Sorry. If they had Antti Niemi out for the year, it wouldn't be as... No offense to Antti Niemi, but it wouldn't be as tragic.
Right, not as polarizing.
In terms of talent level. And then New Jersey, just Corey Schneider can't stay healthy. I don't really think Keith Kincaid's anything special. And so I think that all these teams that we've listed are all teams that are just a half an injury away from going down. Think some of these guys, they play hurt. And that's just no good. And they don't really have anybody to back them up. And I guess New Jersey does have someone, they do have Kincaid, but, and that's why I kept them off this list, is that at least they have some reasonable guys below them. Whereas the rest of my list does not. So with that said.
All right.
Let's get her started with your number 5.
Number 50 de numero is the New Jersey Devils.
Okay.
Yeah, it's funny. I couldn't believe it when I heard it, but I think it was yesterday. It's been almost a full calendar year since Corey Schneider's won a game.
Yes, I also saw that somewhere.
So crazy to think about that. And don't get me wrong. He was, a couple years ago, and probably for the decade before that, since his time in Vancouver, phenomenal goaltender, a great starter. But the last season and a half, he's just been below average. And when you can't win, to me, that doesn't make you, that doesn't help your goaltending depth. Keith Kincaid, I'm kind of with you. I think he's more along the lines of a James Reimer type goaltender.
Yeah, that's fair. A guy who could be a starter maybe in his absolute best prime.
Right.
He can be a starter for a non-playoff team.
Exactly. And I think, 30, 40 games, he can give you decent stats. And he's sort of proved that over the last year and a half, because Corey Schneider has been hurt and playing below par. So, and then beyond that, there's not really anything that excites me too much about this team. And I think the one thing that's kept them lower at number 5 versus a little bit higher on this list for me is the fact that Corey Schneider has proven he has been a phenomenal goaltender in the past. And maybe, he's just, in a terrible, very, very long slump, maybe he might get it back. I don't know.
Could be. I going back to last year, I remember talking about Corey Schneider, because remember he was hurt early on, and it was like there's something going on with his groin. You could just tell by the way that he was moving in the crease and his speed, being able to push off of one leg to the other. If you've ever hurt your groin before, you know how painful it is to try and go move laterally. And so I noticed that was going on with him early in the season, and then boom, he got a hurt groin. So I guess, take that as it is. I apparently watch goalies' groins. So that's
very nice.
My number 5 is the Philadelphia Flyers. I'm sure that they appear on your list. Maybe they're on your list. Maybe they just missed.
No, not on the list at all.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Okay. So the Philadelphia Flyers, and they are number 5. I would have them higher. Carter Hart is obviously someone who's touted very highly. Now, there have been goalies who've been touted very highly that end up being Carey Price. There's also been goalies touted very high that end up being, just or a Jack Campbell, or guys that are taken in the first round and they just don't pan out. So, to me, when you look at goalies and you go, okay, yes, who's the hotly touted guy? Now I have to decide, is it because of the team playing in front of him? Is it the certain level that he's playing at, and then he goes to the next level and he doesn't play as well because there's just so much of an unknown. So many goalies just come out of nowhere to be really good, and maybe not out of nowhere, but they're not necessarily high-end draft picks when they're first taken, and they become at a different level later on in their career at 23, 24, 25. So for me to put them, a team that has such bad goaltending in the NHL right now, like definitely if you took away let me ask you this. If you took away the prospects, where would they be on this list? If we just had no prospects?
I'd probably maybe put them at number 2.
Okay.
Yeah, just because I think when healthy, Brian Elliott can be good, and so can Neuwirth.
I'm going to say that they can't.
Okay, fair enough.
Not
great, but I think
they haven't
can be
shown
good.
It in about 3 years that they can be good. Remember, Brian Elliott was also in Calgary. He's played in a couple spots. Yes, he was good for a good St. Louis team, but and a team that played a strong defensive game. And then everywhere else he's gone, he's kind of dumped the bed. So
anyways,
and on top of that, he can't stay healthy.
No, that is the problem.
Through their carousel of goaltenders. Stolars and Chad Johnson, of course, waived, and it's an absolute mess for the Philadelphia Flyers. I don't understand if Carter Hart is this good, why isn't he up there?
Yeah, that's the mystery.
How much worse can he be than these guys?
Yeah, so. Now you're talking about waiving Neuwirth to keep Stolarz long term for the season once he gets healthy.
Yeah, if you need to, sure.
Come on.
But yeah, obviously they're being patient. They're allowing him to play at a lower level. That's fine. Just because you have a good prospect, that is a reason maybe that you would appear lower on my list. But it is not going to save you if your goaltending is pitiful in the NHL. You're number 4.
Number 4, the Edmonton Oilers. Don't get me wrong. I think that Mikko Koskinen has sort of instilled a level of confidence. I do think Ken Hitchcock has a lot to do with that. His system of play has really, really helped the team feel a lot more confident in front of him.
7-2-1 in their last 10. They won their last 3.
It's pretty impressive. But I still think that he's okay, and I haven't seen enough of him to really make a judgment yet to say, is he for real yet?
He's played, 15 games?
Yeah, that's the thing. Don't get me wrong. He's been decent in those games, but again, I need a bigger sample size, right?
A high save percentage is basically what he has, but, it's now all of a sudden the Oilers are tight checking. It's totally changed. Not to say that he can't be good, but...
Yeah, Cam Talbot, he was good year 1 and just floundered ever since. And you talk about, goaltenders drafted in the first round that were taunted, to be very, very good. Al Montoya, right? 3rd in their system.
Yep.
He's a guy that I had a lot of high hopes for coming out of Michigan, got drafted by the Rangers, was supposed to be pretty good. And he's been a good backup, but...
Yeah, he's been a very good backup.
Yeah.
He's taken over for some teams.
Yeah.
But, there's a reason he's a backup.
Exactly.
Yeah. Edmonton will appear higher on my list.
Okay.
And I'll let that come as it were. My number 4 is the Vancouver Canucks.
Ooh.
Now, I know the Canucks have basically 2 of the top 15 guys in prospects, and that's all well and good. They have what are their names?
DiPietro and Demko.
Demko, yes, that Demko's the one I'm thinking of. It's nice to have prospects but when you look at what's at the NHL level, it just is. I mean, early on in the season, we maybe thought that Markstrom had found some new level of play because he actually looked okay early on. But I mean, again, it was the Vancouver Canucks just kind of being the Canucks. Early on, they looked good, and
back to what we thought they were going to be.
Yep. I mean, Anders Nielsen, definitely nothing special. And then Richard Bachman behind them, mostly playing in the minors. He's only appeared in one game this season and started one, and he let in 6 goals on 29 shots with a nice .793 save percentage and a 6.0 goals against average. So really great game for him. Really good time showing off your skills there. So the Canucks do seem to give up more opportunities than most teams as well. Anytime you have this young team, just like we said, they're coming out fast early on in the season, and then we find ourselves now, a third of the way through the season, and it's exactly what we thought. We thought this team maybe could have some games where they're able to outscore their opponents, but ultimately their goaltending's not very good. Their defense also isn't very good, and so that's where it's really tough. Is this team's lack of goaltending due to their lack of defense, or is it just they don't have good goaltending and good defensemen? So it's very, very difficult, I think, to get a read on that. Although their whole organization maybe has some decent depth, these guys have never played an NHL game before, and so we have no idea what really is coming. I mean, ultimately, pretty much every team has one goalie where they're hopeful that they can eventually at least back up or start. Every team's developing multiple goaltenders. So it's difficult for me to say, that guy's going to for sure make it and that guy's not. Also, you can only have one goalie. So, great, you got 2 goalies who are in your system who are highly touted, but that ultimately isn't, only one of them is going to be a starter. I doubt you see both of them on the roster at the same time. And so another reason why goaltending is so difficult is there really is only one real job, and then a second kind of a pseudo job a little bit sometimes. It depends on the coach you play for.
Right.
You're playing 65 games a year. I mean, that backup spot is unimportant.
Yeah, essentially.
Which is why maybe a team like, Tampa Bay, Vasilevsky goes down. They don't have a whole lot underneath, although Domingue playing out of his mind this week.
He's playing pretty good, yeah.
But, you never know. I mean, that teams are one injury away from all this depth being gone.
Yeah, I mean, you think about a team like, Montreal, for example. Niemi has not played well. Carey Price has been okay, and he's been playing much better since Shea Weber came back.
Sure.
But he goes down. I mean, that team's pretty much screwed.
Really, the team with the best depth in the NHL is the Las Vegas Golden Knights, because they showed that they actually have 1,100 goaltenders in their system. They can just keep on bringing them up. Okay, so let's go. I've got Flyers, Canucks. You have New Jersey and Edmonton as your 5-4. Let's go to your number 3.
Number 3, the Carolina Hurricanes.
Same.
All right. Hey, look at that. Yeah, Hurricanes to me, McElhinney has looked pretty good. The problem is he's 35 years old.
So basically your career backup looks good as your starter.
Right.
For about a 15, 20 game stretch.
Exactly. So how long is that going to last? I don't know. I hope for Carolina's sake that it does last, because right now I think they're currently tied for number 1 in the league with goals against, which is weird to think about, considering that everybody else on their goaltending roster is below 900 save percentage.
Yeah, I mean, McElhinney's played 11 games.
Okay. Yeah, and when you look a little bit further down on their depth chart, everybody knows Scott Darling sitting in the minors. Will he regain form at some point? I think right now he's like at a .915 save percentage in the minors, but again, that's the minors.
Right.
You're getting paid $4 million to be in the minors.
Right.
So you couldn't hack it in the big leagues.
I honestly can't believe it's. Well, I guess because of that money is the reason why Darling wasn't picked up on waivers.
No, that's exactly why, because he's got a couple years left, and
man, it's just too bad. A team like St. Louis just to go. You know what? Let's try it. How many years does he have left in that deal? 3?
Something like that. It's 2 or 3, and I think 2.5. Something.
Maybe you can trade Jake Allen for Scott Darling.
Well,
straight up.
That wouldn't actually be that bad of a thought.
Let's try it. They're out of the division, and as far as their salaries go, I don't think that they're too far off from each other.
No, they're both right around that $4 million mark, so that wouldn't be actually that bad, to be quite honest. But
you're in different divisions too, so it's not like
you don't have to see the guy all the time.
Jake Allen at 4.35.
Okay, and he's got 2.5 years left too. So there you go.
Yep. Hey, it would be like an exact square for square deal. You wouldn't really have to do much.
Yeah, I think the problem is
$200,000.
Okay, yeah, I think the problem is St. Louis's management is just dead set on making Jake Allen work at this point. Like they've made no. God, what's the word I'm looking for? They haven't given you a reason to think that they're pulling away from Jake Allen yet.
Yeah, and I mean I understand why they don't want to, but at some point it's not working.
Right.
I mean we've seen fights in practices yesterday, Bertuzzo and another guy going at it, right? So it just things are crumbling in St. Louis, and
they need a shake up there again for sure.
Yeah, and there's the one place where the coaching change didn't work.
Right.
It has not done anything. Although
well, LA, not so much
Craig
either.
Berube is the coach, right?
Yeah,
so
he is.
I can't believe he just didn't step in and beat the tar out of both players.
That's true.
Because he certainly had the ability to. But maybe he like, I wonder if he brought Robert Bertuzzo over and was like, just go beat someone up in practice.
Just go beat someone up.
Let's just start something. Let's get guys riled up, or maybe at least make them scared to come into work.
Wow.
Make these guys scared so that they're going to start playing. So I don't know. So,
oh boy.
Carolina's still paying off Alexander Semin for another 3 years.
Are they really?
Yeah, $2.3 million. Interesting. So okay, let's go to that was both our number 3s.
Yeah, let me hear your number 2. Let's have you go.
Well, my
first.
number 2 is the Edmonton Oilers.
Okay.
You had a little bit lower.
Yeah.
The Edmonton Oilers, to me, I mean, now Ken Hitchcock, I think that it's just a masquerade for, hey, we'll make this a lot tighter checking. And okay, yeah, I think certain goaltenders thrive in certain systems. Sometimes you need a goalie. A goalie needs a system that's more wide open because they're more athletic and they're fine with that, and they thrive in a less structured type of system. But then you get the goalie who is only good in a very structured system, and he needs that. And so I don't know what Koskinen is because we don't really have a big enough sample size from him, but I don't know if it's any mistake or coincidence that Hitchcock comes in and all of a sudden everyone's defensive numbers go through the roof. So, and they're winning, which I think can be, a strong voice comes into a locker room and Connor McDavid gets behind it. Everyone else is going to get behind it. And, this team has shown that it does have the ability to at least put together some good stretches of games. I mean, they almost made it to the conference finals 2 years ago, for heaven's sake. So it's not like this, and there largely is a very similar makeup to this team to that. And so I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibility that they can find their way back into the playoffs, because I think what we've seen so far this season is that the Eastern or Western Conference is quite shallow. I mean, you go Nashville, Colorado, Winnipeg, and you can probably toss Calgary into there. It really, I don't even know if I'd put San Jose. San Jose, I think we'll figure it out. We'll put San Jose up there. Anaheim, they're one of those teams where you're like, how are you still doing this?
They're a conundrum.
You know what they are? They're the Red Wings of like 2012.
Wow. Okay.
Where you're like, how are you guys still actually winning? You guys are going to go to the playoffs again, aren't you? You sons of bitches. You are going to make the playoffs again. Every year people are like, no, this is it. This team's done. They're too old. And then, they do it. And then but they're probably not going to win a round.
Right.
If they win a round, they're definitely not winning the second round.
Oh, goodness.
And so they're just that team. I mean, they are a minus 13 in goal differential. The only other team in the playoffs right now with a minus goal differential is -2, and that's the Islanders. And that division is pretty wacky. So, when I look at this, you see Edmonton coming up behind them. They're 2 games in hand, and they could overtake them. And then Anaheim's out of there. I wouldn't put Edmonton in any kind of elite spot at all. So, I mean, the West really 5 teams. Maybe I might only really put 3 of those teams into that list.
Wow.
That just might be Nashville, Colorado, Winnipeg. The rest of them, none of them really blow me away.
You know what's funny though? Calgary, they're number 1 in the West. Last time I think this happened was 1992 or 93, I think is what I read today.
Wow.
Which is crazy to think it's been that long since they've been number 1 in the Western Conference.
And in reality, they're 19-12 is essentially what their record is.
They're not bad. So. I mean, don't get me wrong. They don't scare me. As like you're saying, they're not an elite team when you think they can go deep.
And goaltending wise, you know that if you might be able to outscore them. You know, depending on what happens. I know they're.
Although I will say, Mike Smith could turn it on.
He could.
Come playoff
He
time,
certainly could. That is very true.
He did it for Arizona. I mean, granted that was 5 years ago, but
and this isn't to say that Calgary can't be good or that they're not good right now. It just the teams where I look and I go, all right, who could win the cup?
Right.
Nashville, Colorado, Winnipeg. I'm not putting any other team in that list.
I don't know if I put Colorado. I think if Colorado comes close to it, it's all because they have one line that can beat everybody.
I think at this point their defense is really good too, and by the end of the year, they're going to just keep getting better as those young players get better. And they have, speaking of goaltending depth, they have some of the best goaltending depth in the league.
They really do.
And so, I mean, whereas when you look at the Eastern Conference, you go, okay, Washington could win the cup again. I mean, it's just. They've been looking great, even though they've suffered injuries all year long. They've held it together. Tampa, obviously, favored to win the cup. Toronto could win the cup. I mean, as bad as Pittsburgh has played, would it really shock you if they figured it all out and they went into the playoffs and then they went on a run?
Oh, not at all.
Not at all. Exactly.
I think the only thing about Pittsburgh, goaltending, right? You got to figure out what.
Right. Let's say, and if Matt Murray figures out his life and he finds his form from 2 years ago.
Casey DeSmith, 920 right now, save percentage. He's playing great.
Exactly.
I wouldn't play Matt Murray right now, even if he did come back healthy.
If Columbus keeps everybody, if they go past the trade deadline, don't trade Panarin, don't trade Bobrovsky, I think this team loosens up a little bit and they just roll.
They absolutely could. I think outside of those two guys, the rest of the team, they're playing a little bit better than what they were last year, and they gave the Stanley Cup champs quite a run in that first round. I thought Columbus probably should have beat them.
Yeah.
But Holtby saved their butts.
Exactly. Goaltending depth.
Yeah, there it is.
Saved their butts.
Full circle.
So, okay. So there's the roundabout long explanation of the Edmonton Oilers.
For your number 2.
For my number 2, yes. Doesn't scare me. No, your number 1.
No, my number 2.
I
let you go first this time. So Ottawa. I put
Ottawa
the
Senators. Okay.
Team that didn't even make your list.
They would have also, if I kept putting teams on this narrowly missed, I actually was going to put Ottawa next, and I was just like, well, 4 is good enough. I can't say every team because then eventually I'm going to hit some teams on your list.
Yeah. I mean, man, Craig Anderson, he can be good, but he can also be real bad, which is why they're so high. Because when you go past them, I mean, they've got Mike Condon and I mean, Mike McKenna, guys that are just garbage to me, in my opinion. Nothing much
you
to
hear that, Mikes?
Yeah,
You're
get it going.
To Justin.
Garbage. Ottawa leads the league in goals against right now. So for what it's worth, that counts a lot in my book right now. So yeah, that's again, no prospects to get excited about in the system, really. Yeah.
See, I just think that this team has gone, okay, well, we know we're not going to be good. So enough of this trap. Just go and let guys play. Go. Try to outscore teams. And so it's just, I mean, the fact that Craig Anderson is, a 3.58 goals against, yes, it's pretty bad. But that, I think, speaks more towards the team because also Mike McKenna has a high goals against average as well. Save percentage isn't good, but that's you also look at the high percentage chances that teams are getting in against Ottawa, and it's a lot of odd man rushes as well. So it's not these goaltenders' fault.
No.
And I think that when they're playing a better system, when they're playing more defensive, again, that's why it's so difficult to rank these because you look at statistically and they're really bad, and you could definitely have this team up high. I just say, Craig Anderson's dropped into a team that needs a goaltender for a playoff run. Like, let's say Philadelphia. let's say they figure it out and they're in the playoff hunt.
Yeah.
And they need a goalie. And Ottawa's way out. Craig Anderson, a good spot for in Philadelphia, might look pretty good there.
Okay.
Okay. We have arrived to our number ones.
Numero uno.
Are they the same?
Well, I'm looking at yours.
Yeah,
you can't see mine.
You can see mine, yeah. I have a 40-inch TV as my monitor. So, just it's very easy for Justin to see my screen.
Yes. Also, no, we have the same team at number one.
There we go.
The St. Louis Blues.
St. Louis Blues.
Yeah. Poor Jake Allen. So highly regarded as the next big starter for that team, and just has not panned out very well.
No, and you can't point to a bad defense for this team.
Goodness, no.
I mean, the Colton Parayko and Alex Pietrangelo have basically been shopped all around the league by any analyst, rumor people.
Yeah, I keep hearing.
Apparently, everyone's going to Toronto. But those will start up pretty soon. Everybody's going to Toronto. Yeah, I mean, Jake Allen. This is just about Jake Allen.
It really is
the highest touted goaltender to flop so quickly. Like, it would have been, if he had, remember the St. Louis Blues, they made the playoffs with both of the Brian Elliott and Jake Allen as a dual tandem. They made the playoffs, and I believe it was Brian Elliott who struggled in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And so then they let Brian Elliott walk. He went to Calgary, and Jake Allen took over, and it's never worked. Never. He really hasn't gone through really great stretches since then. This team narrowly missed the playoffs last year. So they go and they make a bunch of changes. They bring in some good veterans, some players that have produced other places, and I would say that a high percentage of the reason that they've been losing is their goaltending.
Oh, absolutely. He to me is one of the most inconsistent goaltenders in the league. He is the most inconsistent starter in the league, in my opinion.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, he'll go through 2 or 3 game stretches where I look at this guy and I'm like, wow, that's a great number one they have there. And then 2 days later he turns around and it's like, oh, so now you're going on a stretch of like 7 games at a .870 save percentage. Congratulations on all your success.
Right.
So,
right.
And he's getting paid $4 million. I mean, that's low starter money, but he hasn't earned it by any means. And he got paid that contract right after Brian Elliott left. So they were basically like, hey, you know what? You played, I think he has a 47 game season. He played 47 games because Elliott was getting hurt again.
Right.
And so it's like, okay, we think we're going to pay you.
He played pretty good in that.
Yeah, he did. I think he had like a .915 save percentage or something like that season. But they basically gave him the money and said, hey, we think you're going to be better than what we're paying you, so we're going to try to get a deal now. And it kind of blew up in the face. So
Yep, not working out. Yeah, I mean, St. Louis right now sitting pretty darn far back, 11 points out of the playoffs.
Losing for Hughes.
And yeah, I mean, I just don't think they're as bad as Chicago or LA. Chicago yet to win double digits. The only team left that's won less than 10 games.
Wow. Can you think about this next year if you had Jack Hughes as your top center with Patrick Kane and then you had Jonathan Taves on that second line?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, that would look pretty good. I think the league would love that because Chicago's such a great market.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah, it would be huge. I think the league would always want those players almost in the East. The East, because more people watch Eastern Conference teams other than Chicago, though. I mean, the thing is, like looking at the standings in the East, do you really like New Jersey?
Don't go
really
to Jersey.
Want to see them get another good player, or Philadelphia again, Florida? No, I would rather it be Chicago. At least then it's a team that is going to get some attention. Although that makes it so that they get all 82 of their games on Wednesday night rivalry night for NBC. I know they don't do rivalry night anymore. But so St. Louis Blues are number one worst goaltending depth in the NHL, and there's really not much in their pipeline either, right? It's just kind of barren, and so the Blues need to figure that out. I think that what's going to happen is they're going to deal one of Parayko or Pietrangelo. I could see the Blues considering moving Tarasenko.
Really?
I could see it.
I mean, don't get me wrong. With a $7 million cap hit, you can get a king's ransom back for a guy like that.
Yep.
For
You
sure.
certainly could.
And most teams could afford to find a way to wiggle him in.
Now, I guess I don't think it really makes a lot of sense to deal him because he's a winger he's making good money. He's a good player for you, and you really need a center. And so, how do you get a center? How do you get a good center? Well, you just got Ryan O'Reilly, and he's not the problem. Braden Shen you have, and so it's kind of more like, okay, we need to find somebody who can coach this team because this team just. I mean, remember they went from Ken Hitchcock, right? Ken Hitchcock
to Mike
and
Yeo.
then it was Mike Yeo. Now it's Craig Berube, who's just an interim.
Yeah. I think you find a good coach to put in a good system for this team and then get yourself a good goaltender and and I think you're all set. So, and I've heard Jimmy Howard's name tossed around for St. Louis.
And I don't think Jimmy Howard's going to leave Detroit.
No, I don't. I think maybe at the deadline he might go just to bring something back, but then he'll re-sign.
Yeah. It's fascinating that there's 30 goaltending jobs in basically. Here's the 30 best jobs in the world.
Mm-hmm.
There are hundreds of players playing other positions, and there's no shortage of talent at other positions. And I would say at the goaltending level, at the goaltending position, there is a severe lack of high-end talent.
Yeah, that's fair.
And I don't necessarily care about the statistics. I think this is why this has happened. Because remember, goaltenders used to all be the super athletic, small, like Eddie Belfour. Well, he was like 5'9", 5'10", and just insanely athletic. You had Dominik Hasek, who was 5'10", something like that.
Short guy, yeah.
And he was an unreal athlete, just so flexible and could do crazy things and had such a read on the puck. You started to get away from that when teams started, I guess logically you go, well, if I remember thinking as a kid, why don't they just get some giant sumo wrestler in there and just put pads on him and he'll block the whole thing. And essentially that's what teams did. They said, well, let's get a really tall guy because the butterfly position changed the way that goaltenders needed to be constructed because when they went down on their knees, well, then all of a sudden now all the corners are available. And as sticks progressed and as they became, better and fast, you were able to shoot faster and get the puck up higher more quickly. It made it so that you needed to have taller goaltenders like a Ben Bishop or like a Vasilevsky, a Rene, where you've got a guy who can cover the whole net. But those guys have tended to be less athletic because they're just bigger.
Sure, it takes longer to get down too. I mean, just by default.
So I wonder if because of that, teams went, well, let's just get really big goaltenders, and they started, copycat league. You start bringing in all these goalies that are a little bit bigger, and now you've gotten away from the athletic goalie. And as the pads shrink,
right,
and as the
there's your problem.
Different advantages have changed in the goal against the goalie. That now you got to start thinking maybe we need to move back to a slightly smaller player who can be more agile, more athletic, or it's that you need to take these taller players and you need to work on something different. I don't know as the training evolves, but the goaltending position to me, it feels like there's less star power at the goalie position, and the star goalies that were there a couple years ago, all of a sudden, like Carey Price, he's not even in the conversation anymore for a top 5 goalie or anything. I mean, and he was the guy. He was the best goalie in the league, and he would be the best goalie in the league for the next 10 years. And then he signed that contract, and goodbye.
Yeah, Jonathan Quick, another guy who is sort of faded away a little bit.
But he's very athletic.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Right, and so Jonathan Quick to me maybe is more like a Felix Potvin, where he had a rise, and then he quickly crashed.
Oh, that's a good analogy. I like that.
He just couldn't. If you're too athletic, if you're only athletic and not positioned enough, I guess.
Right. It wouldn't shock me to see the goaltending go back around towards a little bit more of a stand-up type style where guys have to be positioned perfectly just to be able to stop. Because I think one of the things, like we talked about Edmonton's goaltender, right? what's his name? Koskinen, right? One of the things that he's very good at is he doesn't have to move a lot because he's very good positionally, right? That's what he's, at least that's what I keep hearing, is that's what's been very good about him. That's why he's stealing the net away from Cam Talbot, and then Cam Talbot played horrible. But so I think you're going to see guys get drafted who are better positionally than anything else with that little bit of athleticism, because like you said, the pads are getting smaller. Everything's shrinking in size on goaltenders because the league wants goal scoring to go up.
And it is.
I mean, absolutely.
What is it? At this point of the season, for players being a point per game at this point of the season, I saw, man, I wish I had taken a screenshot of this chart. It was like over the last 10 years, I think the most was last year, and there was 8 players at this point this year that were a point per game, and this year there's 24.
Wow.
Which in the last 10 years, 8 is the highest. There were years where there were 2.
Really?
And there's 24 guys at a point per game. So, I mean, I think that, the pendulum has swung, and it's swinging back to goal scoring, and I don't expect that to swing back anytime soon. I mean, the league is going to keep on pushing for more goals, because goals, in an era where you need highlights and YouTube videos and Facebook stuff popping up and Twitter videos where you get those quick views, you got to have goals.
Yeah, goals sell games.
And you know what? Guys are less concerned about blowing people up now with giant hits, and they would rather score goals. That's where all the money is. So I actually, before we end the show, there was apparently a memo. Where did I read this? TSN maybe? Something. There's a memo that went around. The league wants the really chintzy penalties to stop. The one, like the useless hooking ones, and they don't want them called now. Ooh. Because there's been too many power plays. And they think that it's taking away from the physicality of the game, because now guys are afraid to even finish a check.
Right.
So, if the league does indeed go in that direction, I do think that there needs to be more like, all right, this is a penalty, and until, or it's not a penalty until it gets to this point, then it's a penalty. I do like that there's no, like, all the slashing that they took out. Last year, that was good, but there's some like little tiny, the hooks, and like, you
just touch a guy's glove and you're automatically called for a hook or slash.
Yeah. And it's almost too far. Before they didn't call any slashes, and then they went to calling a tap a slash.
Right.
It's just, you got to figure out a good balance there. And it's the interference. Like, a guy shoots away a puck, you should be able to hit him half a second later, as long as you're not hitting his head. Should be okay, but guys don't want to take the chance of getting an interference penalty because they've been so much more strict on it, and so I think you may see that change too. So, I don't know how goaltending depth got into penalty calling for the league.
Speaking of points per game, the amount of players with points per game, Austin Matthew leading all players at points per game right now at 1.63.
He also only played 15 games.
Well, right, yeah, still
15 goals, I think, in 15 games or something.
16 and 16.
16. There you go.
Not too shabby.
Well, that has been our show. Hope you enjoyed our lack of goaltending depth. And we do have one more in this series, and that is prospects. Just an overall prospect and who has the worst depth in their prospect system. It's an interesting one, because you could have, a lot of times the teams that have been on these lists are teams that are naturally below, like deep into the standings. They're bottom feeder teams. Lack of prospect depth, a lot of times it's going to be good teams.
Right, because you're always drafting later in the round, or you've traded away your draft picks.
Or teams that have had, like, I don't think the Toronto Maple Leafs are in the top 5 worst, but 2 years ago they would have had maybe the best prospect pool in the league, but now all those guys have made their team, so they're somewhere in the middle of the pack, most likely. So it'll be a little bit different team selection than the past 4 shows. So join us for that. We'll bring that to you next week, and we'll have some other things going on later in the week. And hit us up on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk, and we will talk to you very soon. Have a good rest of your night.